Support this podcast at patreon.com/Kris Karl Photography Podcast. First thing we always have to do with these is to establish how it is that you first got into photography. So what made you pick up a camera for the first time?
I picked up a camera for the first time officially probably when I was 7 or 8. My parents bought me a Polaroid. I think it's just the regular 100 it was called or something like that, something similar. I probably shot that for a little bit and then just put it back down. After that, I picked up my first digital, I want to say when I was 17.
Right.
Just a small Olympus point and shoot. It had a macro feature that I was like kind of obsessed with for a while, taking photos of bugs and flowers and nature and stuff like that. And then I pretty much took black and white photography in college and became obsessed with the darkroom process. Didn't really go to a lot of my other classes and also failed photography that year due to not handing in my final project on time. But I was pretty much in the darkroom all day long, helping the teacher, helping other students, just because I was in there so often, I could like help them with small problems that they had, etc. And after the college class, I picked up digital and shot digital from when I was maybe 20 or 19 all the way until maybe a year and a half ago now, in which I started shooting mostly film.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that I find quite interesting with you is you seem to shoot film and digital, and it seems to be for entirely different purposes.
Yeah.
What is it about film and what is it about digital that you find so different that you sort of use them differently?
Digital. Well, the way photography has worked for me is I tend to not stay on a certain subject matter for too long. I did a lot of nature photography in the beginning, and then I concentrated on beach photography for a little while, specifically long exposure stuff. And then I got really into bird photography, and that was pretty challenging. So that kept me going for a little while. I had to get like a little bit longer lens and, be real quiet and creepy and stuff like that. And I got bored with the bird stuff. And meanwhile, the whole time I was pretty much assisting at weddings. So I assisted at weddings for maybe like a year when I was pretty young, maybe 20, and then started second shooting a little bit. And then I just second shot weddings pretty much, and I still second shoot weddings. So I never stopped doing that. But I just kept kind of going through different genres of photography up until now. Portrait, landscape has always been a main one just because I can never get it perfectly the way I want. But I've stuck with digital just because I guess that's the generation I was born into. Even though I had so much fun with the film stuff and the black and white, digital was just so simple. And when I was young, I was learning Photoshop. I graduated right into Photoshop because Lightroom was just terrible back then, or not even existent possibly. I don't even remember. But yeah, just like getting used to the editing and trying all these crazy filters in Photoshop and eventually like getting a grasp on Photoshop. Because back when I started photography, there wasn't YouTube and all these tutorials and stuff. So I pretty much learned all that I know about photography in general from a website called Photography on the Net. It's kind of like a Canon-based photography forum that's pretty huge. Like it's huge. It encompasses all brands, but it's mainly a Canon forum. And I would just submit my photos. People would critique them. I would ask people's opinions. I would make adjustments, go out, try different things. I would submit more photos. And it's pretty much just like a classroom kind of thing, except you have all of these way more experienced photographers giving you like full critiques. And I always tell people, like, don't hold back. Tell me this, tell me that, don't worry about it.
Okay, well, let's talk about that though, because lots of people don't like to have their work critiqued. They don't really like anything negative. I feel like we've got this tremendous. I don't want to be controversial, but I definitely think it's an American thing. It's become very much a British thing lately, with this expression of like haters, and that any negativity towards what you do has to come from a place of jealousy or hate. And that I think that creates an ego problem where people think that they're completely infallible unless it's from bad motivation. Why do you like or maybe not like, but why do you get so much productivity out of negative feedback?
It doesn't even have to be like negative feedback either. Just any kind of feedback about something. Like, obviously someone could critique you and say they don't like this or that about the photo, but that can always be like a personal preference thing too. So depending on who the critique's coming from, you would kind of take it with, or like a grain of salt, like how you would want to take that critique. But a better critique would just be, I see that you're trying to do this or go in this direction. Maybe try and do this or do that, and it'll help you down the line with this problem, or it'll help you with the problems that you're currently having, et cetera. And even that kind of critique, I feel like people still get down on themselves. They think that like people don't like their work. And I mean, Instagram, in my opinion, is like a huge problem with that.
Right.
And I know, like, you said you didn't want to get controversial, but like, I have no problem getting controversial about it.
Oh, please, then have at it, especially with Instagram. Please go for it.
Yeah, I'm a very technical based photographer. It's kind of like a gift and a curse. Like, I really enjoy that aspect, but my friend Jeff tells me that, I paint myself into a box sometimes, and I don't let myself break out of that box because of technical aspects that I want to be perfect in the photograph. But even with the way I am, if everyone that commented on my photos on Instagram would just tell me things that they would like to see me do better in that photo, or a way that they think that I can improve the photo, that would be like all I would want to read. Right. I wouldn't even want to, like, they don't even have to comment like awesome photo or anything.
I was having a conversation last week with a very prominent photographer in the UK, and he had shared basically an entire story about how pissed off he was with constantly getting comments that were like, awesome, amazing, great, super. And he was like, that's just nothing. You're just commenting for the sake of it so that someone has a look at your work. And there's all of this reciprocal feedback that's actually completely worthless. And it actually ends up stagnating people because they just become so happy with the smell of their own farts, basically.
Yeah, so the commenting with like awesome and stuff like that, I get that people want you to look at their work as well. In our film community here, that like, I guess I feel like I'm a part of in the US, kind of, there is a lot of that, which I think should change, but I don't feel like it's too much of come look at my work. I think that they just want to say good job or great job, but don't. Like, sometimes some people don't know what to comment on the photo, or like how to comment on the photo. So like, I still say good job and stuff like that too. But if there's something that I like or think that they're doing a really good job of, that's when I leave like real comments, like color contrast, look on point, like love that there's no color cast, or your micro contrast is crazy, stuff like that. Like things that, they're probably working on to try and perfect, that I think will give them a boost of motivation. Like, oh, people are noticing that I'm working on this problem that I have, or, whatever. And maybe that they'll get excited and try harder, because getting my colors the way that I wanted them in film once I moved over to film was my biggest challenge and what I worked hardest on. I spent all of my time trying to get my colors the way I wanted them, and concentrated only like kind of on subject matter. So I'm just kind of like shooting around Buffalo and doing some car stuff. And with COVID, we can't do any portraits. So I'm, super pissed about that. But
well, let's talk about your portraits. I find that there's a real shortage of portrait photographers these days that aren't just following trends. And I definitely don't put you in that bracket, which is fantastic. When it comes to taking portraits, what's your sort of directorial style? How do you communicate with your subject?
The communication between me and my subjects is probably my weakest aspect. And I'm sure it is for a lot of other people. I don't, in my head, I don't imagine myself as being awesome with the way I manipulate light and position my models, but I think it might be slightly subconscious where I usually get kind of close to the look that I wanted when I'm finished. So right. I think that the lighting is, I'm doing like a decent job with that. But as far as like talking to the models and, you know, giving them direction and stuff like that, that's my weakest aspect of my portrait work. So I try to have like a very laid back style if I can, and try and like, you know, get them in a laid back position, like try and make some jokes in the beginning, you know, talk about things that they love in life while we're like walking to the spot. My friend Jeff, who I shoot a lot of film and digital with, he's much better at talking to the models and putting them at ease. And we do a lot of shooting together. So 3 of the portraits that I recently posted of Lawrence, that photo shoot that I did was with my friend Jeff, who was also shooting film. And we both were positioning and moving him at the same time. Sometimes Jeff was holding the scrim and talking to Lawrence. And sometimes I would say, oh, move your head this way. And Jeff would say, oh, bring your chin up a little bit because he can notice light, coming from like the other way. So right. I do feel like that is something that I have to work on above a lot of other things.
Well, I think one thing that gets confused quite often, I mean, I have taught some workshops in the past to do with portraits, and it's the idea that there's like a right way to do stuff, especially when it comes to direction. I feel like, like if you're quite an introverted person, you're quite a quiet person, and someone tells you that the best way to direct is to be as loud and sort of abrupt as possible, it's just going to look out of character and you're not going to be comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, with your directorial style, are you quite focused on like managing body position and stuff, or are you just talking to them generally as you're shooting?
So with digital, obviously you have much more freedom because of autofocus. So I can talk to the model and just shoot and talk and shoot. And I usually don't have to worry too much about the focus, although I do shoot very, very wide open, almost like 100% of the time. So when I'm shooting at like 1.2, I usually use live view and manual focus, even on my digital camera or on my digital camera, just because I don't want to get home and have missed any of those shots, because you can't even really tell on the back of the camera if you actually nailed it or not. And then as far as film, it's much more like static, I guess. We're moving the model, and then when they're in the position that we think is a great shot, or they're moving and we're like, oh, hold that. And then you go in and you're trying to grab the angle and make sure you get the focus and stuff like that. So it's a much slower process on film.
Bit of a broad question I'd like to ask you, but what is it that shooting portraits actually does for you? What do you enjoy about it?
It's the most technical part of photography or genre of photography that I've come across. I mean, landscape is pretty technical in my opinion. To get landscape photos that are extremely 3D and have a lot of depth with like perfect lighting and perfect sky retention and just, you know, across the board awesome, takes a lot of work and a lot of skill in post-processing. So that was always really technical, but once I started doing portraiture, I realized that I have to bring everything together that I know from all the other genres of photography, but now I have to interact with the person and, you know, listen to them and they listen to me. And there's like a mutual respect and a situation going on between the two of you. And, you know, you learn about this person that you didn't know before. You know, sometimes you're walking to and from spots. Sometimes you even get a drink with them after. You find out things about their life. It's like a small friendship's almost created.
Right.
Yeah. So the whole interaction is just much better. And it's also extremely difficult to just get crazy good portrait work going on. I mean, you can take some portraits and be real happy with them, but to blow your own self away takes like a lot of work, in my opinion.
100%. When it comes to the split that you've got between shooting digital and film, do you have like set genres that are specifically for one or the other? Or is it just split in the sense of what you feel like going into a job?
So moving over from digital to film, I literally just want to do everything that I do with digital, but with film, because it's just so much harder. So I just carried over all of my interests pretty much. The way I see the world in digital isn't different than the way I see the world in film. It's the same. I mean, if I'm shooting, said film stock, I might choose my subject matter differently based on that, and obviously the speed of film and all that other stuff. But as far as the subjects that I want to shoot or go out and shoot, etc., it's all the same to me.
Let's talk film stocks. What are your go-to film stocks?
When I first started shooting film, I just shot a lot of Portra 400. That's a good mid-range, or I guess high-speed film, I guess you'd say. You could shoot it in the middle of the day pretty much. You could shoot it early morning at sunrise. You can carry it over into the evening. It pushes easy, etc. I got kind of bored with the portrait look and the desaturated color, and you see a lot of it online though. So with seeing all of the overexposed images and the more muted color look, I just kind of didn't want to do it anymore. And my friend Alex, Clouds of Delusion, was shooting a decent amount of Ektar in the beginning, and he was loving the Ektar. So I grabbed like a roll or two and I shot, and it was phenomenal. And I was like instantly hooked. It was everything that I wanted. And I wasn't shooting Ektar because from what I was seeing online from examples, people were just shooting landscapes a lot. And I didn't look very hard, but what I saw on Google Images or whatever, when I was checking out film stocks in the beginning, was just a lot of underexposed landscapes that were like the filmy look and very faded in the shadows and stuff like that. And that's not like the look that I wanted. So I shoot a decent amount of Portra 400 when I shoot people. I'm just getting into Portra 160 just so I can shoot wide open in different situations. Same as 400, same situation, but Ektar, black and whites, I would do T-Max 400, Delta 3200, getting into slide film a lot now. That's probably going to be like my next thing. I'm probably going to kick Ektar to the curb in like a week or so and just only shoot slide film. And then, Cinestill. I went on a Cinestill kick for like a couple months of just shooting that straight because I love night photography. I loved it on digital and I wanted to do it on film, but I don't like the color being changed from what I see in reality. I know that's kind of like a film thing. Like you choose a stock and then those are the colors you're getting, but I like that very clean. I like my whites to look white. The shadows, I don't have a problem if they go toward blue or a different color, but so I started trying the Cinestill and I liked the cool trendy red circle halation around the brightest highlights and stuff. So I shot that for like 2-3 months straight. And then I got really pissed at Cinestill because they can never keep their film in stock. And then I started to shoot Vision 500T. I found a guy in Hong Kong that hand rolls the IMAX film. So I could shoot 120 because I don't really like 35 millimeters very much. Okay. So I wanted to just shoot it on 120. And I was shooting all of this on my Fuji GW690. The 500T was fun. I only done it once though. And I did the remjet removal and all that. That was like a cool thing to do. And they came out pretty great. I mean, the blacks were pretty black and I didn't get a lot of shadow detail, but the time that I chose to shoot was kind of like this blue hour mixing into just darkness. And I think I gave myself a really tough contrasty situation to put a test roll through.
Right.
The colors are great and everything though. And I liked the shots, but they could have been better shots. I wasn't like 100% happy with them at all.
If you don't mind me jumping back real quick, you just mentioned not really liking 35 compared to medium format. Why?
To be honest, there's not really like an actual reason. It's too many shots per roll for me. I'm very selective about the shots that I take. And even though film slows you down and makes you wait for the images, I can't wait that long. So, I mean, I develop and scan all my stuff. So I'll go out and I'll crush like a roll of 12 on the Hasselblad and then, or, 8 shots on the Fuji. And I'm excited. So if I have time, I go home, I develop them, I hang them, I go do whatever, and then I scan them. With these, with 35 millimeter, I have an amazing 35 millimeter camera. I have an FM2N, a Nikon. It's stunning. It's a beautiful camera. It's amazing to look at. The sound is great. Speed up to 4,000ths of a second. It kills it. But with so many shots, it takes like 2 weeks to get through a roll for me. And I can't switch out rolls. So also I don't really like the resolution that much in detail. That's like leaning into my technical side. So there's like technical reasons I don't like 35 as much. I just like a cleaner image all around, I guess. But just with the scanning, I've made like some tweaks to my scanning process, and scanning the 35 millimeter is a much better situation now. So they're much cleaner images. So I'm going to start to give 35 millimeter more of a go now and see how it goes. So if I can get through some rolls, I should be pretty happy with the scans like after that. In the beginning, when I was shooting 35 millimeter, I liked it a lot more because I was getting scans back from like the Fine Lab and they were just amazing. They just looked great. But still taking forever to get through a roll is like a turn off for me.
You mentioned earlier that you really enjoyed your time in the darkroom. Are you still developing your own film?
I develop pretty much everything. Color, black and white, now slide. I only did black and white when I was in school. And the obsession with the darkroom was definitely not the developing. It was the printing and using the enlarger and stuff. So I lost all that. The developing is definitely fun. If people are afraid to develop, I would just tell them, don't be afraid and just do it. And even if you mess up your first test roll, the second roll will come out fine. Even the first roll will come out fine. You won't mess it up. And then you'll be a part of the entire process, which is, it adds tenfold to the enjoyment of shooting film. It's like the whole creation process is pretty much why I shoot film, other than having gotten like kind of bored with the digital thing. Just shooting the image, going home, developing it, not screwing it up, checking the negatives when they come off the reel. You're super excited. You hang them. You're looking at them. You come back into the bathroom to check them hanging. They're starting to curl too much. You're like, oh shit, is it like too dry in here or whatever? Should I turn like the faucet on to get some humidity or something? I don't know. It's like help them. And then the scanning thing, and you see everything through the whole time. So you're in charge of color, contrast, everything. Whereas when I was getting stuff back from a lab, even though I liked the images, there's no way to judge if you overexposed it a little bit, or if there were imperfections in the frame and they just fixed it. How much did they tweak the colors, et cetera, et cetera. So I think like developing would be a huge part of people learning how to get their exposure right, which to me is like one of the most important things.
I absolutely agree with you about it being a lot easier than probably people realize. I recently, within lockdown, started to develop film on my own for the first time, and the first few rolls was absolutely perfect. I had no problems at all. It was actually, I think, like the 5th or 6th roll where I started to become a bit too confident with it. It was when I made my first mistake. But that's kind of the fun of it, right? Is making the mistakes and learning from them. That's kind of the fun of it. I want to ask you a question that takes us in a completely different direction, if that's okay, because I'm kind of interested in this, and maybe I might be the only person in the world that's interested, but I see you primarily as a film photographer because that's where I first came across your work. What do you use in terms of your digital gear?
I shoot on a 5D Mark III, and I have a 17-40 f4. A 35 1.4, an 85 1.2, 135 1.8. I have a second Canon body I still have a 5D2, but I don't shoot that really. It's just like a backup. And then I have, various studio gear and stuff, strobes.
What do you make of the shift of like companies like Fuji to make digital cameras that have the aesthetic of being a film camera, but they're a digital camera in essence?
I don't have like a problem really with people like throwing emulated filters on stuff to make it look like film. I mean, you can always say, why wouldn't you just shoot film? To be honest though, it's like a huge changeover and investment to go into the film world. So you can't just kind of tell someone, oh, why don't you just go shoot film? Sure, they could, just grab a point and shoot or an SLR, then send their stuff off to the lab. But I think if people want to do the film look, they're just going to do it themselves in Photoshop anyway. So the fact that Fuji is putting it in their camera just makes it easier for people. And I don't know. Yeah, people are going to do it anyway. I'm sure there's like a bunch of negative aspects too. I mean, less people might want to shoot film. No one's really learning any editing techniques if they're just slapping a filter that the camera gives them right on the photo.
Right.
I mean, I know the Fuji cameras are sexy, so I don't know how I actually feel about the film presets that they have in there, but those cameras are beautiful.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're really, really beautifully designed. I would,
yeah,
I'd be more than happy with an X Pro 3 if someone was giving them away.
Yeah.
With the fact that you're shooting Canon DSLRs digitally, have you not considered potentially something like an EOS 1 or an EOS 3 for the sort of the ability to still shoot film but have access to those lenses?
Yeah. So I grew up hanging out with Alex, Clouds of Delusion, and he has like a bunch of film cameras. So I think he has an EOS 1. It's not the 3. I think it's a 1. It's giant, right? It looks like a 1DX pretty much.
Yep.
I think. Yeah. So I brought my digital gear, or some of it, when we went on a backpacking trip, and he brought like his Instamax, his point and shoot, his Hasselblad, his EOS 1. And he's like carrying all this shit. I'm like, you're crazy, man. That's like an extra 30 pounds on your back. But when we got there, I was like, oh, I wonder if I should try grabbing one of these, because then I can throw my 85 on there and, give that a whirl. Just, I don't know. I haven't checked out prices or really looked into it. Cause like, again, it's 35 millimeter and I have like this love hate with 35 millimeter. If it was a medium format camera that I could just take and throw my Canon lenses on it, I would definitely do that.
That's fair enough. A bit of a broad question. I do like to ask slightly broad questions on this. What impact do you want your photography to have on the people that are seeing it?
I'd be happy with any kind of feeling. If it made them feel angry, sad, even if it was the opposite feeling of what I was trying to portray. I mean, if it's pulling something out of them emotionally, I guess that's what art's all about. So just an emotional draw. My images, though, I don't think my images give people too much of like anything. I don't know if that's just like me hating on my own work. I mean, I don't do anything that's like super artsy, or, I mean, I'd love to start doing that and try doing that, but usually the stuff that I consider really, really artsy, that's not the kind of like work that I shoot. I just shoot for myself and for fun pretty much. So if people see an image and they're like, oh, that's really cool, or, oh, I love that car, or this portrait is beautiful, I'm happy with that.
For you, what's the hardest part of photography?
Hardest part of photography, like in general, between both mediums?
Yeah, I mean, just the thing that kind of gives you the biggest resistance to getting what you want out of it.
Pushing myself onto the artistic side. I'm extremely technically based in how I shoot. And I've had like extensive conversations with my friend Jeff. He's over at Film Query on Instagram, and we shoot a lot together. And like, you know, if you misfocus on something, but the image is still amazing, it would have to be like really amazing for me to still feel like it's an amazing image. Like a misfocus that's still like an awesome shot, I probably wouldn't post it. I probably would forget about it. Jeff tells me that, like, you know, I paint myself into a box. I don't let myself expand out emotionally as much into photography because I just love the technical side so much that I get lost in there. And I don't let myself do certain things that I might consider the wrong way to do it technically. Because, you know, when you're making art, there shouldn't be boundaries on how you're creating. You shouldn't be telling yourself like, oh, I can't do that because technically that's not like the way a perfect photograph should look, or blah, 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 like in my own mind.
Is that an OCD thing though, do you think?
Yeah, I have a lot of OCD. I mean, sometimes like when I can just be shooting handheld, I'll still use my tripod just because it forces me to like fully compose the shot like exactly the way I want. And I can be 100% sure that, you know, my depth of field preview is giving me from here to there in focus, and I can throw my mirror lockup on. So instead of taking an image handheld at like, you know, f4 or 5.6 on one of my film cameras, I can take it at 11 or something if that's what I wanted to do, even though it's like daytime. I won't take the shot at 5.6. My tripod's always with me no matter what. Like no matter what, it's either in my car or I'm carrying it, which sucks because it's kind of large.
Something that I've found lately, and obviously this could be entirely geographical, but with the lockdown and the restrictions on movement and not being able to get out and shoot probably as freely as I'd like, I'm finding it quite hard to motivate myself kind of creatively to do anything with photography. And it's a little bit of a creative depression, I would say. What is it that's kind of inspiring you at the moment to keep doing what you're doing?
So when the whole COVID thing started, we never really fully had like a full lockdown. So while it was like super frowned upon to go out and do things in public, I never really felt like I was contributing to anything negatively by going out, because I go out before sunrise or after sunset, and the places that I go and the things I shoot, there aren't people around. So even when I'm there, I wouldn't even like have to wear a mask. I would just be shooting with no one around and whatever. But I was motivated by the lockdown pretty much to just strap in and work on my color. I used that as an opportunity to I just do tons and tons of reading and tons of like cross-referencing of what people say on the internet and what people say on Instagram. And Negative Lab Pro, I've been like, you know, chest deep in that since I found out about it, and in their forum, and cross-referencing that with like internet stuff. And so I just took all those months to like work on my color and seeing color cast that may or may not exist like in the photo and stuff like that.
And the last question I'll ask, I really do appreciate you taking the time to do this. The last question is about, are there any photo cliches that kind of bug you or piss you off, or that you just can't stand seeing when you're flicking through Instagram or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a million. I mean, they don't like personally bother me. It's funny because speaking of, I guess, cliches, or Instagram has like so many things that are just going on constantly with trends and all that. So like my friend Alex, he was shooting film and he was in the community kind of and being successful way before I was. So he was like meeting a lot more people, seeing a lot more of like the work that was going around. And me coming over from digital into film, I knew all the things that I hated about digital, and I could immediately see all the things that I didn't like about film, and how everyone kind of shoots all the same stuff and what's the deal with these old cars and these abandoned buildings and all the Americana and all this other stuff. And like, I would just make fun of it, like, constantly. And me and Alex would joke about it and we would argue about it. And now that I shoot a lot more film, they still are trends and all that, but I do kind of get what people love about it. When you go out and you shoot cars, it's like the thrill of the hunt. You're trying to find like sweet cars. You're driving around. You're like, oh crap, look at that. You slam on the brakes. You turn around. You check it. How's the lighting? It's like a scavenger hunt kind of. And the abandoned building thing, that's always fun, digital or film. But I don't know. We would just rag on it like, shoot a bunch of cars. You'll get real popular on Instagram and blah, blah, blah. But like digital, like you can't even make fun of film because digital has so many worse trends. There's all the smoke bombs. There's shooting crazy depth of field with something right in front of the camera in focus, and then just a bunch of bokeh like in the background and crazy color shifts between the highlights and the shadows and all of these. I don't know, like the depth of obsessed people on Instagram, like their whole crew and all that. I don't know. Yeah, it's just endless. I don't know. There's like a million on digital though. A million trends that like I don't follow or I think are cool. All the fairy light stuff that everyone does, and
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give a bit of a shout out. There is a photography page on Instagram that I really like that takes the piss out of that kind of stuff, and it's called Trendy Photography Memes. And
nice.
depending on my mood, it's either going to be a really enjoyable thing to see come up in my feed, or it will just piss me off because I'm so sick of seeing it. My current personal hate is the FaceTime photo shoot. I can't stand seeing that stuff. I'm so bored of it.
What's the FaceTime photo shoot?
Okay, so basically what it is where models and photographers couldn't meet up, what they would do is the model would like have their phone out, and then the photographer would take screenshots through FaceTime and then do like the most obnoxious skin edits. And yeah, it's just not for me. Each to their own, but it's definitely not for me.
I think the only issue that I really see with photography trends is getting lost in a trend. So whereas if you really, really love shooting abandoned buildings, like by all means, like shoot a bunch of abandoned buildings. That's like your thing, go crazy on that. Don't close yourself off to shooting other things that you might also be interested in, but you don't know because you only shoot abandoned buildings. So people shoot like a lot of buildings or cars, and then if that's all they shoot, they might not ever find the myriad of other genres of photography that are out there that they might just fall in love with. Just going through all the genres I've gone through in photography, it just keeps making you a better photographer along the way. You might just leave bird photography behind, but like when you see a crazy bird image on Instagram or wherever, if you shot bird photography, you look at that shot and you're like, that was an insanely difficult shot to get. Like, look at this. Like, how the hell did he get that? This dude's legit, blah, blah, blah. So you have a different appreciation and you can look at things in a different way by having shot so many different genres. So when you fall into like a trend on digital or film, I feel like you're taking away from yourself.
Yeah, and what you could learn going from one genre to another, because there's stuff that I've done within weddings that's fed into the way that I do portraits and vice versa. There's stuff I've done with street photography that I'm slowly picking up that it would work great within shooting candid stuff within weddings. So you can always take information from one genre and apply it to another.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you could take the zone focusing system from street photography and just throw that into a wedding. And when people are moving about, if you can zone focus on a manual focus film camera, you could just be nailing shots that you would never be able to nail before.
100%. Most important part of the podcast is that everyone knows where they go to find your work. So please tell us where everyone should be headed right now to look at what you do.
I'm pretty much just on Instagram now. I took my website down a while ago, but you can find me at Risen Before Dawn on Instagram, and my digital is The Brief Moment Project.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Kris. It was a lot of fun.